Hi all. This presentation is about natural selection and VIST, V-I-S-T, variation, inheritance, selection, and time. You will not be taking notes over all of this information. I will tell you what it is that you do need to write. So at first you're just going to be listening. Once I get to the stage that you need to write, I will tell you. All right, so we are talking about evolution, and we have been discussing natural selection recently, so we are going to continue talking about this, the theories of evolution and natural selection. If we were to define evolution, we would define it this way. It is descent with modification. Basically, what this means is that all living life forms are descended from their ancestors. So present-day life forms are descended from past life forms. All life is related. And what we find is that the present-day life forms do not always look like past life forms. That's because over time and from generation to generation, organisms descend and are modified. So they change from the organism before them. So evolution is descent with modification. Don't worry about writing that down. As an example, if we look at the wolf is the common ancestor to all dogs. So when humans first started to domesticate dogs, the dogs that they were domesticating were wolves. Then over time, humans artificially selected the wolves for different qualities that they wanted those domesticated wolves to have. So maybe we wanted to have dogs that were strong and fast runners. We would artificially select the traits in dogs that would lead to fast, strong dogs. Likewise, if the human wanted dogs that were small and were able to get into small places, they would artificially select the traits of smaller dogs and would breed smaller dogs together, and they would end up being smaller dogs that could do different things for humans, like running down rabbit holes, trying to find rabbits, stuff like that. So, descent with modification. All of these dogs are descended from their wolf ancestor. They were all modified differently depending on what was artificially selected for by humans. So that is an example of descent with modification. We now, by the way, have over 400 types of dogs that have all been artificially selected for their traits from the original wolf ancestor. That's pretty impressive. All right. In order for living things to change, there must be a process for that change. And that brings us to what you're going to be writing down. It is the idea of VIST, V-I-S-T, which stands for variation, inheritance, selection, and time. So, the definition of natural selection, which VIST is part of, is the process in nature by which only the organism best adapted to their environments tend to survive and reproduce, while those less adapted tend to not reproduce. Go ahead and push pause and write this definition down. All right, so that's natural selection. In other words, this is the idea of survival of the fittest. Only those organisms that are fit enough to survive to pass on their genes to the next generation. If an organism is not fit to survive in the environment that they live in, they will die. So that is survival of the fittest. Natural selection is the concept that drives evolution. The components of natural selection are this idea of VIST, which is coming up, which you do need to write down. So on the left-hand side, write components of natural selection. Then, variation is the first of these that we're going to look at. Go ahead and write variation on the left, and then all of this on the right. So a variation is that all life forms vary genetically within a population. It is this genetic variation upon which selection works. So if you've got brothers and sisters, you do not look exactly the same as your brothers and sisters. Even if you're a twin, you're not 100% exactly the same as your twin. There is variation. So when a new organism is born, it is very similar to its parents, but it also varies quite a lot from them as well. So write this down. Again, variation on the left, right-hand side, write all life forms vary genetically within a population. It is this genetic variation upon which selection works. Next, inheritance. Genetic traits are inherited from parents and are passed on to offspring. Write inheritance on the left and the definition on the right. Basically, what this means is those differences that organisms have from their parents, they inherit from their parents. They get those genes from their parents. So variations are passed on to the next generation. Hit pause and write this information. Next, selection. You will write selection on the left, the rest of this on the right. So organisms with traits that are favorable to the survival of that organism get to live and pass on their genes to the next generation. Unfortunately, organisms without those traits that are favorable tend to die younger and are not able to pass those genes on to the next generation. So organisms that are fit are not selected to die. Organisms that are not fit, unfortunately, do not survive. So, selection are organisms with traits that are favorable to their survival get to live and pass on their genes to the next generation. The example for this is the peppered moth. In class, you have learned about the peppered moth during the Industrial Revolution. The natural form of the peppered moth is a light-colored moth that fit in very well with the background of the tree trunks in the area of England where they lived. These peppered moths that were light color truly fit into their environment. The dark-colored moths, which only happen 1 in every 100 or 1,000 births, did not fit well into the environment and stuck out, quite frankly, like a sore thumb on the trees that they lived on. So, before the Industrial Revolution, the white or lighter colored pepper moths were more fit, and the dark moths were less fit. The dark moths got eaten, the light moths did not. Then, during the course of the Industrial Revolution, pollution was put up into the air and coated the trees around the factories, making the trees' background dark colored. And this worked out for the dark colored pepper moth. They were able to blend in now into the background, and the lighter colored ones were less fit. They did not blend in. And the birds tended to eat the lighter colored black moths or peppered moths, and the dark colored ones were able to survive. And over time, the population of dark moths far outnumbered the population of light moths. This is an example of selection. Now, final part of VIST is time. Evolution takes time. Evolution can happen in a few generations, but major change, such as forming a new species, often takes long periods of time. So, the peppered moths, over many, many generations, evolved to the dark form of that species. Not all of the moths were immediately dark colored. It took time. Time is the deciding factor in all of this, and is what has led to the changing of species and the evolving of all the species that are here today. It takes an incredible amount of time. So that is VIST: variation, inheritance, selection, and time. Just to point out, the theories of evolution and natural selection are what are known as science's unifying concepts. These two ideas are some of the big ideas in science, and they relate to a number of different areas. If you can understand evolution and natural selection, you will then better be able to understand when we talk in astronomy or physics or biochemistry, geology, biology, and anthropology. Those ideas, natural selection and evolution, occur in those areas as well. So it is a unifying concept. You will discuss these again in the future. So that is it. If you have any questions, make sure to speak to your science teacher. And otherwise, have a great day. Bye.